Progress at Langley in the 1960s. The culture was changing at the Langley Research Center, too. When Dorothy Vaughan turned off the lights in the West Area Computing Office for the last time, she and the remaining women in the segregated pool were sent out to other divisions of the lab. The era of West Computing, a separate division for African American women, was over. Dorothy Vaughan was assigned to the newly built computer complex on Langley's west side. By the 1960s, Langley had centralized its computing operations into a group named the Analysis and Computation Division. It served all of the center's research operations as well as providing electronic computing services to outside contractors. In the new division, Dorothy was reunited with many of the West computers as well as with other women who had worked in East computing. More striking than the racial integration of the female mathematicians was the fact that men had joined the team. Computing had been promoted in status from being an all-female service organization to a respected co-ed division. Computing was no longer considered women's work. However, with the increasing use of computer technology and aeronautical research, some of the older women at Langley, who still did most of their work using the older model mechanical calculators, fell out of touch. The early 1960s were a time of change in the history of computing, a dividing line between the time when computers were human and when they were machines. Computing jobs were no longer handed off to a room full of women punching numbers into $500 mechanical calculating machines. Room-sized computers that cost more than $1 million each now did the same work and did it many times faster. Faced with this new era in computing, 50-year-old Dorothy Vaughan reinvented herself as a computer programmer. Engineers still came to her and asked for help. Now, instead of assigning the task to one of her staff or doing the computations herself, she programmed the calculations into an IBM computer and let the machine do the math. In the past, Dorothy would have set up the equations in a data sheet and showed one of the women computers how to fill it out. As a computer programmer, she converted the equations into the computer's language, Fortran, by using a special machine to punch holes into 7 3/8 by 1 3/4 inch cards. Each card represented one set of instructions for the computer. The longer and more complex the program, the more cards Dorothy or another programmer fed into the computer. The machines could not take more than 2,000 cards or 2,000 lines of instructions. Even modest programs could require a tray with hundreds of cards, which had to remain in the correct order. As powerful as the computers were, Project Mercury required even more electronic brain power than Langley had available. At the end of 1960, NASA purchased two IBM 7090 computers and installed them in a state-of-the-art facility in Washington, D.C. That computer lab was part of the Goddard Space Flight Center, which opened in 1955 in Greenbelt, Maryland. NASA established a third computer data center in Bermuda. Together, these three computers would be able to monitor and analyze all aspects of space flights from launch to splashdown.